Okay, let's begin Unit 9 on modeling data. We're going to talk about a lot of different statistic stuff. Uh, and as we take a look at that, our first unit is called Texting by the Numbers. We're going to take a look at different data distributions, histograms, box plots, things that maybe you've learned before, maybe you haven't, but we'll use those to compare the shapes of those distributions and learn how we can interpret them and how we can compare the different distributions and find out what they tell us. So the way it's going to work is there's some activities that you're going to work through. You're going to kind of work through it on your own and kind of try to understand the information. And then I'll talk through it on the video a little bit. And then you'll have some homework that you'll work on in class that I can help you out with to help solidify your understanding a little bit. So why don't you just read through the opening paragraph and the data that goes along with it and the histogram, and just jot down in your notes what information you can conclude based on the histogram. So read through paragraph, take a look at the chart, and what are things that you notice and wonder about the chart, and just write that down. Pause the video and then restart it when you're ready to see my thoughts and compare them with your thoughts. Then when you get to class, you can ask me any questions you had about that, or we can talk about that a little bit more. So pause the video and restart it when you're ready. Okay, so some of the terms that I used and maybe you talked about, but maybe you noticed, first of all, that the numbers are kind of spread out. We've got some numbers that are between 260 and 280. So you remember a histogram measures the frequency, how often something occurs within a given range. So we're going from like 0 to 19, 20 to 39, 60 to 79. So it covers about 20 numbers, and it tells us the total between those 20. So we can see that between 260 and 280, there's it's like about one person sent that many texts, but that's kind of what we call an outlier. Um, this value right here is just it's way away from the rest of the numbers. Between 0 and 180. Then we got this one that's way out here. So those are what we call outliers, numbers that are way beyond the spread. And typically we talk about those being about 1.5 times outside the spread. So as I mentioned, these are like 1.5 times the interquartile range. And we'll talk about that when we get to our box plots. But numbers that are way out there. The shape of this kind of forms like a U. And we see that we have modes. We've talked about those before most often. So we've got two peaks to this. There's a lot of people that send 0 to 20 texts and a lot of people that send 140 to 160. Those are the most often, most popular numbers. You can maybe guess, which person's friends are which, Rachel or her mom. And then the center, where most of them centered, where's the middle? You can kind of guess where that is. Maybe it's around, the 120 to 160 range, where, the middle, whether it's the mean or the median. The spread, these numbers are pretty spread out from 0 to 180. They aren't really packed together. So those are some of my observations. Maybe you had some other ones. So a histogram is able to show those frequencies pretty well. Another representation that we use is a box plot. It's called a box plot because, well, it looks like a box. And another thing we call it is like a box and whisker. So the box and whisker plot uses these 5 values: the lowest number, the highest number, the mean, which is the middle number, and then we have the third quartile and the first quartile. That makes up all the lines of our I can't talk. It makes up all the lines on our representation. And oftentimes the lowest number we call the minimum, and the highest number we call the maximum. So to keep it in terms of what we know, the highest numbers are max. Third quarter is, well, third quarter of a game is halfway between the second half. So halfway between the middle and the end. The mean is the middle. First quartile is after the first quarter, so it's halfway between um, the first half, so between the lowest number and the middle one. So if we can find all those numbers, we create a box plot, box and whisker plot. Here's the box, here's the whiskers, and we can represent a lot of the data. So this box contains the middle 50% with the highest 25% on each whisker. So maybe you've done one of those before. With all these numbers, it's a lot simpler to do this using technology. So I'm going to show you how to do it on the TI-84 calculator. I'll also show you an app that you can do it, or a website that can do this for you as well. Alright, so if you've got a TI-84 calculator, this is how you'll do that. We'll go to List, so we click Stat, and we're going to edit our list. And if you have some values in there already, you're just going to clear those out. And we're going to enter the data that we have. And so what we're going to enter is the numbers that were listed in our chart. So those same numbers I'm going to type into my list. So we start with 150. And then we had 5.5. And I'll just keep typing the list all the way through. So you can see how I enter this in. I'm going to pause the video and finish typing these in for us. So then once you get all the data entered, you're going to go up to Stat Plot, so second Stat Plot. And you're going to make sure that it's turned on. So Plot 1 is turned on for me. So I'll go in through here and figure out which one I need. Here's how I turn it on and off. Just click on or off. Pretty simple there. Then I click Type Plot. So this was my scatter plot that we used when we did regressions, or try to find correlation. So if I want my histogram, this is the one I'd use. And so box and whiskers right here. This first one will get you a box and whisker and exclude the outliers. So we'll just do the regular box and whisker for now. Select it. Our list, L1, that's what we typed all of our values in. And then we're going to go to Zoom so we can see our plot. Zoom Stat, number 9 down there, will help us to see all of our data. I've got my parabola on there. I'll get rid of that one so we don't see that. Okay, so there's our box and whisker plot. Now let's take this box and whisker plot and let's interpret it. So if we go back to our box and whisker plot, let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of these. So what's the pros and cons of each of these representations of the histogram and the box plot? So basically, what does each representation highlight? What can you find easily on each of these? So take the time to answer these two questions here. What information is hidden or obscured in each representation? So what do you like about this? What do you dislike? Same with the box plot. So pause the video, restart it when you're ready to see my thoughts, and compare it with your own thoughts. Alright, so here are my thoughts. I thought that outliers might be better seen on a box plot. You can kind of see that this whisker is pretty far out here, so we can see that maybe this is an outlier. And as we talk about an outlier, we want to keep in mind that outliers are 1.5 times the interquartile range. So our interquartile range would be from the first to third quarter. So that interquartile range for this one would be 144. So is it 1.5 times more than that outside? Doesn't look like it. So even though it appears to be an outlier, it doesn't qualify. Although, this end is further over here, so we'd say it's skewed to the right because there's less data to the. Actually, there's the data spread out to the right as opposed to here on the left. It's all jammed together on the left whisker. Box plots seem to show ranges and the median better. You can kind of see how far spread out and where the middle is more clearly than we can on where exactly is the middle number. I can see, oh, it's 75. It's hard to tell because there's a lot of frequencies. Box plot also shows where the majority of values lie, so I can quickly see that 50% of the data is between 6 and 150, 25% from 150 to 275. Half the data is more than 75, half is less than 75. Whereas a histogram can show frequencies better, I can see, oh, there's a lot between 0 and 20, and a lot between 140 and 160, and not much between 180 and 260, whereas here, I don't know how much is between here. I just know that, where these values lie in, this is the middle, this is the third quartile. Modes are more evident in a histogram. I don't know how much of each there are. But the histogram shows that very clearly. So each of them have their advantages and disadvantages. Just depends on what you need in order to represent that particular one. So part 2, prior to talking about the data with her mom, Rachel had created a box plot of her own using her own data. And it looked quite differently when they combined their data. So let's describe the data that Rachel collected from her friends. And this is up here. And what does that information tell you? And why don't you go through and answer the rest of these questions? What do you think a reasonable number of texts Rachel can send per day? And then Rachel wants to continue sending her normal number of texts. That's about 100 a day. Her mom would like her to decrease this by half. Present an argument for each side using mathematics to justify each person's request. So go through and put an answer to those, and I'll share what I thought on those to finish up the video here. So pause it and restart it when you're ready. All right, so let's analyze and compare the two sets of data. We can see, we got different values on our number line, but if we can compare them, we see that our original number line, and if we kind of mark in where the other one would be, we'd be at about 100 for our low value, and this is at about 130, just under 150, and just over 150 for the box, and the whisker at about 175, with a couple outliers out here, and just under 50, a couple here. So as we compare the two, it's easy to see that, well, Rachel's friends are the ones in the upper half of the data, and her mom's friends in the lower half of the data, which maybe is similar to your situation. Maybe your mom doesn't send as many texts as you do. But we can clearly see that her friends send well over 100 texts per day. So what do you think is a reasonable number? I thought, well, according to her mom, 6 to 150 would be a reasonable number since that's the middle half. And anywhere around 75 would seem reasonable for her. So, under 50, seems to be in that reasonable range for her. According to Rachel, her friends are between about 130 and 160, the middle half. So that would seem to be a good middle number for her. So if she wants to continue sending her normal texts 100 a day and her mom wants her to send only 50, well, her mom might say, well, less than half the people send 50 texts or fewer. So that would be reasonable. And as you count the data, we had 23 out of 48 total send 50 or fewer. So it's less than half of the data. So if we take a look at that, 50, especially if we look on our histogram, 50 or less. Here's a big chunk right there. So that would make sense to her mom. She would look at that data and say, hey, you can send that, only that many texts. Well, Rachel might say, well, her friends, there's only one of her friends that sends less than 50, and that was an outlier, according to her friends. And all but these 4 right here send more than 100. So 100 would seem to be a reasonable data. If she's only sending 100, she is, on the lower end of her friends. The median number is about 140, middle half is about 130 to 160, and 100 is less than that. So she is, not sending nearly as many as her friends. So she'd be able to say that I can continue sending 100 texts a day because, majority of her friends, 20 out of 24, send that many. So I think that Rachel would have a pretty good argument in that regard. So that's an introduction into box plots and histograms. You can take a look at this homework and you can work on this in class as you review measures of central tendency. That would be your mean, which is your middle number. Your median, median is the middle. Mean is the average. And then your mode, the value that occurs most often. I'd like you to explore those three and determine which one would make the most sense according to what we're looking at. Would the mean, median, or mode make sense? And give a reason why. And then you'll create some box and whisker plots of your own. You can do those by hand or use your graphing calculator to do that as well, and histograms as well. So here's a website that I'll give you that you can use to create a box and whisker plot if you don't have a graphing calculator. You just go to the website, type your data in here in a list. So let's say we have a couple different values. You can enter those in. You hit update box plot and it creates a box plot for you. If you think you have outliers, you click that. Yes, it uncovers those outliers. You can even show the statistics, find your minimum, quartile 1, median, quartile 3, and your maximum. It tells you how many numbers are on your list. So that will create that box plot for you as well. So that's a simple website that can do that for you. So work through that on your own, and then I'll help you out in class when you need some help.